In the previous classes, we have learned about classification. What is classification? What is the need of classification? And why do we do classification? Continuation of that classification system, I would like to tell you what is taxonomy. We have touched a little bit of taxonomy in the earlier classes also. Taxonomy is the branch of biology, the branch of science which deals with the naming of organisms as well as classifying them into various groups for the convenience of the biologists. Taxonomic hierarchy. Taxonomic hierarchy, as we know, taxonomy is not a single step process. It involves a lot of steps, a lot of groups. So the whole lot of categories of taxonomy together form the taxonomic hierarchy. Or in other words, we can also say that the various classes, various steps of the taxonomic system. For example, if we classify a tiger with the biological system, we will say that it belongs to kingdom Animalia. We know that its scientific name is Panthera tigris. So it belongs to the genus Panthera and the species Tigris. But in between this kingdom and species, there are many more steps. The steps are, first is the kingdom. The broadest classification is the kingdom. There are two kingdoms in the linear system of classification, as we know, that was Plantae and Animalia. So now we have many more kingdoms of classification which we will discuss, which we will learn in the coming lecture only. So we were talking about Panthera tigris. It belongs to kingdom Animalia. After the kingdom, the next step is the phylum for animals, and in the case of plants, we don't call it phylum, we call it division. After this phylum or division, we have the class. The class is further divided into order. After the order, we have family, then genus, then species, which means that kingdom is the highest category in taxonomic hierarchy and the species is the lowest category in the taxonomic hierarchy. Many species together combine to form a genus. Many genera together come under a family. It is like that. So the next thing I would like you to know is the kingdom, this system of classification. We all know Carolus Linnaeus. He gave two kingdom system of classification, which was Plantae and Animalia. But now we do not follow this system of classification. Why? Because the system given by Linnaeus was not successful. The reasons for the failure of this system of classification were many. To name a few important ones, the first one is this system was not based on the various characteristics of the animals. Like, there was no distinction between the eukaryotes and the prokaryotes. When I say eukaryotes and prokaryotes, now what do we mean by this? One term is eukaryotes, other term is prokaryotes. Eukaryotes are the organisms in which all the cell organelles, the different parts of the cell are well defined, like the nucleus, the mitochondria. And when we say prokaryotes, prokaryotes are those organisms in which the cell organelles are not clearly defined. The nucleus is not clearly visible, it is not clearly defined. Similarly with other like Golgi bodies, like mitochondria, they do not have distinct cell organelles. So, in linear system, there was no distinction between the eukaryote animals and the prokaryote animals. In the linear system, also not differentiated between the unicellular organisms and the multicellular organisms. We know unicellular, the single-celled organisms like the amoeba, the multicellular, the advanced organisms like humans, plants, trees. There was no differentiation made for classification. The third thing which was not made distinct in linear system of classification was the photosynthetic organisms and the non-photosynthetic organisms. we know that some plants or some group of organisms can synthesize food for themselves. They are photosynthetic. Some cannot. They are not photosynthetic. We have a clear distinction, but the linear system did not follow this distinction, and there was no different category based on these characters. Other thing why this system was a flaw is that many organisms we know that didn't belong to either Plantae or Animalia. For example, the viruses, the bacteria, they don't belong to Plantae either or the Animalia. So these were the reasons for the failure of the linear system of classification. But he was the father of classification, he gave the guidelines, and on his guidelines many biologists worked. And in like Robert Whittaker, I've told you that Robert Whittaker was a biologist. In the year 1969, he gave a 5-kingdom system of classification. We have discussed this earlier also. Just to brush up your memories, I am repeating this. R.H. Whittaker or Robert Whittaker gave the 5-kingdom system of classification. And on what characteristics, on what basis he gave the system of classification? There are many things. First is the cell structure. What is the structure of cell like? I said some are eukaryotes, some are prokaryotes. So basic structure, what is the first unit of our organization, body organization? It is cell. What is the structure of cell? This Whittaker considered this first to classify organisms. Second thing, he was like body organization. After the cell structure, how is the body organized? There are many ways to study this body organization, which we will be studying in the further lectures. The third thing which Whittaker considered was mode of nutrition, which is very important. How the living organisms, how the animals or plants or other living things, they acquire nutrition. Do they prepare their food? Are they dependent on something else for their nutritional requirements? Or if they are able to provide food themselves, then how? What is the process? By photosynthesis or by any other method? So these were the criteria which Whittaker followed to give the 5-kingdom classification system. All living things present on this earth have been classified by Whittaker in 5 kingdoms. What are these 5 kingdoms? They are, namely, first is the kingdom Monera. Second is Protista. Monera and Protista. These are very new terms which we have not studied in this linear system of classification. The other thing was fungi or fungi. You may pronounce it as fungi or fungi. Plantae and Animalia are the same as given by Carolus Linnaeus. So, the 3 different kingdoms which Whittaker gave as compared to linear system were, first one is Monera, second is Protista, and the third is fungi. Plantae and Animalia are the same. So, before we proceed further, I would like to tell you is that Monera, the first kingdom Monera, it is basically and totally concerned with bacteria. There is nothing beyond bacteria in this kingdom.